Good evening, everyone. My name's Mark, and this is Two-Way Tonight. Thank you for joining. At this hour, Donald Trump is speaking to House Republicans and his club in Florida, as predicted by this reporter this morning on the morning program, whatever that's called. It's open. There's live coverage of it. And they said it was closed press, but of course it wasn't going to be. It was a prediction, but I won't, I don't, I'm not asking for huge kudos because duh, as the kids would say. Of course, it's going to be open. Let's dip in, see what he's talking about. If it's interesting, we'll stay with it. And if it's not, we'll come right back out.
If you look, it was really meant for children of slaves. This is when it happened. The children of slaves, it was not meant for everyone to come into our country by airplane or charging across the borders from all over the world and think they're going to become citizens. It's not meant for that. It wasn't meant for that. And hopefully at some point the courts will understand that without having to go through a whole big deal. This was meant for the children of slaves. And look at the timing of it.
All right, we'll come back.
I hope
We're in the
judges will
weave.
understand
This is
that.
the weave.
And it
We'll
has
come
to
back. As you can also see there on the screen, Scott Bessent's vote to be Treasury Secretary, he will be confirmed, is happening probably during a time we spend together. So we'll let you know what that final tally is, presumably 53 Republicans plus ex-Democrats. Be curious to see. Surprising to some of the Trump nominees are getting a fair number of Democratic votes on final passage. All right, I'll run through the news and give you my take on some stuff, and then have some great guests lined up for you, and we'll hear from them, and then we'll take your questions and comments. And if you'd like to be in the conversation, particularly if you've never raised your hand before, no matter where you are on the ideological spectrum, we'd love to hear from you. So please do that. If you're watching on YouTube or Twitter, great. Please remember, if you decide you want to comment during our live program together, exercise fidelity to peace, love, and understanding, and the presumption of grace. Those are not just throwaway lines, but they are the ethos, the blood, sweat, tears, beating heart of this platform. So thank you for joining. And again, very happy to have you here. Donald Trump today is expected to sign some more executive orders. As far as I know, he hasn't yet, on DEI programs and also to reinstate troops who refuse to get COVID vaccines, American service personnel. The big personnel news, though, right now that broke just a while ago is the acting attorney general, fired some number, said to be more than a dozen, of career prosecutors who worked with Jack Smith on the two federal prosecutions of Donald Trump. The classic example of a Trump move that will delight some and horrify others. On the delight side, they believe those prosecutions were completely ridiculous, and they, as they say in their statement justifying the firing, how could they possibly believe that those people who participated in what they considered to be two completely out of control prosecutions could be expected to carry out Donald Trump's agenda at the Justice Department? And on the other side, these are career officials who were simply doing what their bosses asked them to do, recruited by Jack Smith, whose team was made up of some career officials and some outside prosecutors. Some question about how they can legally be fired because they are civil servants. That will sort itself out, but you'll expect to hear quite a bit about this move in the days ahead. Some of the other moves he's already taken, like particularly related to personnel, but not only related to personnel, like firing most of the inspectors general, also still getting a lot of attention and a lot of discussion about whether they have any recourse. Big story today. We mentioned it in the show this morning. The Chinese AI tool DeepSeek had the effect today after they claimed to have produced a pretty good product for pennies on the dollar to what is costing the American enterprises who are trying to develop the same kind of tools. Markets took a big hit in the companies that have invested heavily in AI. Lots of questions about trying to strip down the Chinese product and figure out, is it what they claim it is? Is it possible it was produced for as little as possible and as little as they say? And of course, lots of concerns about national security because some believe this suggests the Chinese are far further along down the AI path than American spies and industry analysts have been led to believe. Maybe further than the US, but certainly further along than people had thought. And the race for AI to dominate AI is a domestic matter in the United States, a huge economic story. But certainly, almost no one would say that that's a bigger story than competing with China in particular on the development. And we're going to have some folks on to talk about this later in the week. But it's just a massive story. And the Biden administration really struggled to figure out how to accentuate the positive aspects of AI while not leaving America vulnerable to all sorts of potential catastrophes, including national security threats, and never really seemed to get their arms around it. And several people, including Mark Andreessen, said that they really had a view of government control of AI that was not compatible with the market forces and the reality of the development. Trump administration has brought in very good people, including David Sachs, a genius. I don't know, whatever you think of him, he is a genius, to be in charge of trying to figure out the right balance between public, private, and also to compete with foreign powers like the Chinese. So more on that coming up soon. Uh, the First Lady released her portrait today, her official portrait. It's number 3, please. I don't know that it's ever been done before because I didn't have time to research it. But I don't remember since the Truman days an official portrait being black and white. But apparently she went with the old black and white, which is, moody. Maybe they put a filter on it. But that's her new portrait. There you go. All right. Speaking of women who run to live in the White House and their spouses, Doug Emhoff announced today that he is joining the what do you call those law firms that are white shoe law firms? Is that what they're called? White shoe law firm.
Yep.
Wilkie Farr and Gallagher LLP uh, to be a lawyer, go back into lawyering. Not surprising. He liked his legal career. Maybe the most interesting thing in the story and in the press release is that it says that Mr. Emhoff will split his time between Los Angeles, California, and Gotham City. Another indication that the Emhoff Harrises, plan to spend a fair amount of time in my neighborhood. So we'll continue to keep our eye on that. All right. Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles, who sat a seat away from Donald Trump at a kind of a roundtable event on Friday and took a fair amount of heat, is taking a fair amount of heat from people who are her constituents, as well as some people within the Los Angeles government and Sacramento. Hearing from quite a few sources that they believe that her political future is cloudy at best, and are concerned that she's not moving fast enough. And that was a big theme of the event on Friday, in which both Donald Trump and some of the attendees urged her to get moving faster. And she was saying proudly that some things would take only a week. And Donald Trump and some of the people in attendance said, no, a week's too long. Like, these things need to happen now. So I don't have anything to tell you beyond there's growing concern about her capacity to do the job to which she was elected, and growing concern about how she's dealing with the pressure and tensions and demands of addressing the fires and the fire aftermath. All right. I'm skipping over a bunch of stuff that I don't know that we need to do. All right. As we said at the top, Donald Trump is talking up a blue streak, and we're monitoring it. But I want to show you a clip from the event of number 11. It's going to be Sam. A clip from the event that's ongoing now, where he makes what we call in the business a little joke.
I don't know how anybody could even vote for the other side. In many cases, they don't, but they do get credit for it. You'll have to think about that. I've raised a lot of money for the next race that I assume I can't use for myself, but I'm not 100% sure because I don't know. I think I'm not allowed to run again. I'm not sure. Am I allowed to run again, Mike? I better not get you involved in that argument. No, we raised a lot of money, a tremendous amount, and our teletown halls are something that's very special that nobody else is able to even contemplate using. We've gotten a lot of people elected with those teletown halls.
All right. We'll keep monitoring that. We'll keep waiting for the Besant vote, and maybe signing some executive orders. We shall see. But let's bring in our two guests today, two familiar faces to the vast North American viewing audience here on two-way. Mr. Alex Castellanos, ladies and gentlemen, please, a hearty round of applause for our mustachioed, bespectacled resident genius. Alex, thank you for joining. Haven't seen you in a while. We'll find out why that is. And then you know him from the morning meeting. He's always in a good mood, or at least seemingly so. And he joins us now in the PM mode, kind of like
Right.
Dan Turrentine After Dark. Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Turrentine. Dan, thank you for joining. Alex, where you been all my life, or at least the last couple weeks?
I heard the election is over, so I left town.
Ah, where are you? Are you in Miami?
I'm in Key Largo,
You lawyer, so you're not too far away from the House Republicans and Donald Trump.
not far enough away.
Thank you again both for joining. Let's start right there then. Alex, you've covered your share of administrations. Do you recall a president, not to mention a president in his second term, do you recall a president having such a strong hold over the congressional wing of his party as this?
Not in my lifetime, but I'll tell you, something that has changed and Trump is taking advantage of. He is trying to make sure everyone understands this is a team sport now. And you're either wearing the Trump jersey or you're wearing the
Colombian jersey.
Yes. And so you can't decide to wear the jersey and then, well, I'm going to sit out this particular play, or I'm going to play for the other team on this particular play. So I think he's doing a lot of things now, including these retreats as Coach Trump to build team spirit here. And it's smart stuff.
Yeah. Dan, is there anything Democrats can do to drive a wedge between Donald Trump and these followers in the Congress?
No, and in fact, right now, the opposite is true on the Democratic side. Both Jeffries and Schumer told members they could vote their conscience on the Laken Riley Act. They are also being told on this censure of the ICC that Senate Democrats don't have agreement on it. And so I think the party is still scrambling to try to get its footing to figure out where to try to draw a line and ask everybody to hold hands in lock in opposition.
By the way, if you want to have a good laugh, just think about the idea that you are allowed to vote your conscience on this one.
Yeah. Yes,
Oh.
that's a good point. Alex, the first week has been quite something. It's certainly been high velocity. Again, just as we never saw a transition like this, we've never seen a first week like this, again, in our lifetime. And Donald Trump's approval rating now is higher than it was in his entire first term. So we talk about political capital. Dan talks about it quite a bit. How does public opinion matter, if at all, in the Trump executing his agenda now?
You know, the old theory is you build political capital, you get elected with it, and then you spend it to govern, which is true unless you're actually going to do some of the things you said you were going to do that helped you build the political capital. And that's a shocker, apparently, in Washington. Gee, you mean, wait a minute, we can create a factory that will sell products people will like? And this will actually help us politically if we govern well. Yeah, I think that's what we're seeing. And Trump's going to get a pretty good ride here. I know we're looking at, okay, he's going to have trouble internally with the House Republicans and the Freedom Caucus. And yes, there are going to be a ton of fights. But big picture wise, this guy's already made the economy work once by undoing what the previous administration had done. We've got a retreat from globalization where capital is scared, not going to stay in China and wants to come home. We've got a business-friendly administration. In a few months, if this thing starts to tick and move forward, maybe his numbers now are low.
You know, I'm always on guard, as I know you two are, for assuming that real people are paying attention to something that political people are paying attention to. I truly wish I were cloned, and I would send my clone to Milwaukee or Green Bay probably, and have him go to a diner every morning and say, "Y'all talking about the J6 pardons?" I really think that a lot of this stuff directionally is Scott Bessent confirmed. We'll wait for the
Yes.
vote count.
Yeah.
I think directionally, people are seeing, we've talked about this before with Steve Elmendorf and others, people are seeing action. And I think they are seeing sort of some things they like, kind of, again, directionally, they're seeing action on fulfilling promises. But so many of these things, I just can't imagine my friends in the Green Bay Diner are talking about. For instance, the firing of the Jack Smith prosecutors.
Exactly.
It will be MSNBC will have to add 3 hours of prime time to talk about that. And the Washington Post will have it at the top of the homepage for the foreseeable future. But Dan, do you think they're talking about that in a Green Bay diner?
Yes and no. I mean, I think to go back to what Alex said, the thing that got Trump elected that he ran on was fixing the economy, right? If the economy were booming and inflation hadn't happened, this would have been a different game. But how many people in the fall said my economic situation was worse? And so I'm going with this guy. I'm giving him a chance. A lot of the stuff he's done, some of it, immigration, he's beginning to move. It's small potatoes a little bit right now, right? It's 80 people, not 8,000, but okay, it's action. But on a lot of this stuff, it's helping Trump, but I don't know if it's helping people. And I think they like the action. It's a good start, but he has not put points on the board to help real people yet, in my opinion. Now, it's only been a week. You could argue that either way.
Alex, just speak for real people. What's the best thing and worst thing Trump's done for real people?
Well,
Not for their lives, but for their perceptions of how he's doing.
you're absolutely. But to your point about Jack Smith and all of that, you know, democracy already reached its end when he got reelected. So more stories about the end of democracy, I'm not sure are going to have a lot of
Yeah.
traction. I think you're dead right about that. But your question was,
Name something he's done that you think if you walked into a Green Bay diner and said, folks, what's Trump done that you liked? What would be number one on their list?
number one would be he has demonstrated strength and pulled the world together.
Okay.
And
And number two,
when
you said to him,
you govern
yeah,
in metaphor, right? When you don't have to lock up 5,000 people a day. If the way Mexican drug gangs used to work is they'd go into a country club in Mexico City and say, "Give me all your watches and your purses," and then somebody would say no, and then they'd shoot him in the knee, and everyone became much more cooperative. All you need is an example, and other countries begin to react. For example, today with Colombia and the Colombian president, do you think other countries got the message?
they did. And I
So
bet a bunch of senators got the message too.
there was a spot that closed the Trump campaign, which went, 4 years ago, we lost our way. 4 years ago, we took a wrong turn and America lost its purpose. We lost the strength that makes Americans who we are. That strength, I think, is back. Now, I do think, and I'll say it again, I think he is going to benefit from 4 great years of economic growth. One is government is going to be business friendly. That makes a difference in attitude. Two, if we retreat from the world and the rest of the world is on its own, as Trump is wont to do, that means capital comes back home. We're going to be flooded with money here and investment. And then on top of that, you've got an AI boom, tech. Hey, we're inventing television and radio and the printing press again. If buy some futures, folks, because Trump is not only a talented guy, but he is also a fortunate individual. This is not a bad time for this country, and he may be hitting the sweet spot here just right.
Scott Bessent confirmed 68 to 29, so more than a dozen Democratic votes. Alex, if you walked into the diner and said, what's the thing Trump's done you like the least, what would they say?
I think it's probably some of the usual Trump excesses, the hyperbolic statements, the things like he did today, running for his fourth, fifth, sixth term. That's probably makes up some people a little queasy.
Yeah.
But right now, has he really done anything that is new that he didn't talk about during the campaign?
Well, taking the security details away from some people. I
Yeah.
know people in Washington are upset about that. I don't know if the diner, if they care. Um, all right, gentlemen, uh, you had over the weekend Lindsey Graham and Tom Cotton both taking exception under questioning with some of the things Donald Trump has done. They didn't like taking away the security detail. Graham didn't like the pardons. Uh, they Cotton defended the IG firing, but others have not. What motivates a Republican senator to get off the Trump reservation on some issues? Is it simply principle? Because that's all I can think of. Because they're not getting any brownie points from the media, and those guys don't need to quote unquote show their independence from Trump. So they're not. I don't think they're looking to do that. So is it anything but principle that causes those guys to step out of line on some issues? Dan.
I think it's largely principle, and there's a little bit of like, someday there'll be a Democratic president, and Cotton may be there, and Lindsey Graham may be there, and so I think in Chuck Grassley's case, he's always thought highly of inspectors generals. He's always kind of been the one to carry their water and flag their reports. So I think they want to say something, but they're certainly not going to get out of line and cross the president too publicly.
Alex, are they doing it for any reason besides principle?
I think right now I agree with Dan. I think there are three Republican parties right now. There's the populist Trump party, there's the smaller conservative ideologue party, and there's Mitch McConnell and a couple of pals in the old establishment party. And you'll see Lindsey Graham, who is on occasion, part of that establishment party.
Yeah.
You'll see a conservative ideologue now and then wander off the Trump reservation because they are motivated by their conservative faith. But if you think either today or 4 years from now, which is going to be the largest segment of the Republican Party, it's the Trump populist wing. So
Yeah.
I think, as you guys have talked about before on the show, that there is a cost as things get tougher and harder as things go along. Some of these people begin to, stay out past curfew. It makes it easier to stay out past curfew the next time.
Yeah. Again, if you want to get in the conversation, please raise your hand. I meet cynics all the time, including some people in the Trump cabinet and some senior Democrats on Capitol Hill. I'm thinking of specific people now who say basically no one in politics ever acts out of principle, that there's always an ulterior motive. I find that to be, again, too cynical, because I don't think Tom Cotton and Lindsey Graham have any motive but public interest to try to prod Trump to do what they think's right for stepping out. And so I take this opportunity to say, raise your hand if you can tell me another reason why they would do this. Dan offered one, but I think that's relatively idealistic too, not as idealistic. But I was quite struck by those two guys because they're pretty loyal to Trump. Cotton, in particular, has become a conscript in the Trump army, and is
I
pretty
think Cotton
on message.
served with Pompeo in the House, if I'm not mistaken. Like, I think that may be a little personal with him, that Mike Pompeo is a good man, and his friend, and served honorably, and like, hey, there could be real world consequences for my friend by doing this.
They do worry people. I mean, I've talked to a lot of folks who say, what if something happened? What if the Iranians come back?
Yeah. Yeah, I do hear that. Let's hope that's just a hypothetical. All right. We'll go to your questions again. If you want to be in the conversation, please raise your hand. We continue to monitor the Trump speech. Charity, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Tell folks who don't know, which probably includes Alex, where you are and what's on your mind, please.
Hi, all. I appreciate the opportunity to be on the show. I live in Austin since last week. When I spoke to you once before, I was in Phoenix. But last week I moved here to Austin. to take a job with the University of Austin, which is a new university here. I'm going to ask a question that isn't maybe top of mind everywhere, but I was thinking about Linda McMahon's confirmation hearings that I don't think have been scheduled yet. And I've been thinking about education policy primarily because of how it intersects with the work that I do in higher education. My role is to help this new university get its initial accreditation. And they just enrolled their first freshman class in the fall, and they're working on initial accreditation. Trump had a video out about his education policy a few months ago, and Linda McMahon coming back into the administration to, be nominated to run the department if it lasts. And he's talked about eliminating the department and all these different things. And I'm just curious, I know this isn't a big hot topic. It's not, the Tulsi Gabbard hearings or the people who've just been voted in, but it is something that's top of mind for me. And I was curious to get your thoughts on where that's headed.
Where her confirmation is headed, or education policy, or?
Yeah, both.
Yeah. For those of you unfamiliar with the university Cherry's working for, I recommend you Google it. It's a fascinating project by some extremely smart people who are trying to create a free thought university.
Yeah, and they were profiled on 60 Minutes a few weeks ago, so there's a good video, and that was actually a pretty favorable reporting. I was nervous. I had started with them in October and just finally made the relocation, but I was nervous when they said, oh yeah, we're being profiled on 60 Minutes, and I was like, I hope it works, and it did. It was favorable.
Yeah, it was very favorable, and my friend Neil Ferguson is involved, and he's one of the smartest people I've ever met, and the whole faculty is great, and the mission statement's great, and it'd be good for America. No matter where you are in the ideological spectrum, you should be cheering for this to succeed because it's a new, innovative university. Alex, education. It's been an issue that's helped and hurt your party at various times.
Gosh, education and healthcare always sink our boat, but maybe not now. We are the Republican Party now under Donald Trump is certainly the outsiders, anti-establishment, anti-old way of doing things. And this is a great time to go out there and, I think, demonstrate and market that why are we doing things the old way? Are we happy with the results? And if you go to that argument to a government in Washington helmed by Trump now saying, hey, this is what the future looks like. Trump now has that, a new wave of young people, the working class coalition that appreciates openness and common sense like that. I think I think there's more opportunity for real support in Washington for that than Republicans have had, than transformational figures have had in a while. Not just Republicans, Democrats too.
Dan, I think your party was hurt during COVID by a concern about education policy, the role of the teachers unions, et cetera. Have you seen any indication that your party is going to have the upper hand on this issue in the new administration?
I don't know on the university level. I think Alex makes a lot of good points, and the fact that you're in Texas probably doesn't hurt with the Republican administration. The Democratic Party seems to be beginning to make more public statements about where they got it wrong during COVID, with school shutdowns, the impact that it had to children, the impact that it had to whole communities, really. I think this is one of those issues that we have work to do to get the upper hand again. I think people are somewhat distrustful that we have their best interest and not, unfortunately, the teachers union's best interest at heart. But hopefully we'll, come up with some opportunities and some ideas to get back on offense. So as Alex said, that and healthcare.
Charity, tell me what you're hearing from folks reacting to the 60 Minutes piece in general. Like, is it a lot of enthusiasm, or still people confused? Or
there's a ton of enthusiasm. We've been able to kind of prove out with this first freshman class, they're in their second term now, prove out the debate about first principles and kind of applying what they're learning from kind of the great works to problems today. There's a lot of great innovation projects that the students are working on as part of their programs. So there's a ton of enthusiasm. The students are really vibrant and well-spoken, and they have a lot of great things to say. The faculty are really accomplished, and they're getting out into the world. We see some cool people coming in for being speakers too. Gad Sad will be on campus on Wednesday. Glenn Lowry is coming soon. So like there's some really cool like internet, public intellectual folks who are coming through and being speakers and debates and whatnot. So I think there's a ton of enthusiasm. I'm hearing all good things. The biggest question is always, oh, you're not accredited yet. And no one really understands that it takes time to get your initial accreditation. That first accreditation follows the freshman class through to their graduation. So it's a good 4 to 6 year process. But that's the biggest question we get. Oh, aren't you accredited yet? And like, no, but only because it just takes that long. But other than that, yeah, the enthusiasm is big. I think the only kind of funny bit is that once in a blue moon, you'll see the headline that says, oh, the anti-woke university, and no one there much likes that, because that's not the point. That's not the mission. That's not what they're there to be. But it gets kind of misstated or boiled down to that framing, and no one there much likes that. But outside of that, the enthusiasm is really high.
Part of the framing, I think, that we're seeing from something that has been added to the political debate when tech people have, like Elon Musk of the world, have moved. They're not talking about being just anti-woke. They're talking about opening up the world to ideas from everybody. I know Joe Lonsdale's involved, right?
Yeah, he's the head of our board. He's the chairman of the board.
I have put that on a ton of surveys. Do you want an open school system where parents get to choose? Do you want an open healthcare system where you and your doctor choose the treatment, or where you do according to some norm or best practices? Do you want an open economy? My theory is that if 200 years ago we had technology, the word open would have replaced the word freedom. So I think you guys have something that appeals to Democrats and Republicans, and it's transformational in education.
Yeah. And Charity, 2 more pieces of good news. The rugby team is undefeated as far as I understand it.
Yes.
Just kidding. You've moved to what is America's either 3rd or 4th best food city. So congratulations to you on that.
Yes, I'm very excited. I've got a list of restaurants a mile long to try.
Yeah, go to Maudie's for the queso. Alex, can you name America's 4 best food cities in order? Go. And don't say Miami, because it's not right.
I'd say Quebec.
America, not North America.
Oh, no, I meant America. That's one of our new states.
Quebec?
Wherever, somewhere.
Oh,
Best food cities.
In order.
I can tell in order. Well, I'd still put New York number 1. I would put Memphis number 2. I would put New Orleans number 3. And where would I put Miami? Miami maybe number 4.
You got one correct out of 4. Dan, would you like to try?
all right. Well, without those, I would have guessed San Francisco.
Number 1.
Um,
It's actually fallen to 2. Take it back.
okay.
San Francisco's 2.
Seattle.
Los Angeles is number 1 by a lot.
Is Portland,
lot,
Oregon
yeah.
on there?
Los
No.
Angeles, San Francisco, New Orleans, Austin. Thank you
right.
very much for playing.
Next
It's not my opinion, guys. It's just fact. Pay attention. Chicago's very good too. Chicago's 5th.
The
Charity,
East
thanks
Coast
for
has got
joining.
nothing.
Come back anytime. It's got nothing. You know why? Try to get a good avocado on the East Coast. Just try. Do your best.
Isn't that what Whole Foods is for?
As always, we're for alliteration here. So, Mr. David Dallas, you're up next. Welcome in. Thank you for joining.
Hi.
Tell folks who don't know where you are, and then what's on your mind, please.
I'm in Dallas.
So your name's
And,
not really
I'm from New
David
York
Dallas.
originally, but I moved to Dallas
sir.
14, 15 years ago. So enjoying the cold weather here, which is rare, but it happens. You guys always talk about Democrats not coming on the show. And I'll talk about my mother, who is a diehard Democrat, been a Democrat forever. she's in her 70s now, but she's still very active, very into politics. And she's voted Democrat, governor, senator, and president every election that I can think of or know of. And she's in Pennsylvania now. So she's in obviously a important state. And she is fed up with the Democrats, even though she voted for Kamala. And her issues are, a lot of what Trump's doing, the border, DEI, too much of the transgender woke stuff, whatever you want to call it. And it's really, I guess, the common sense that's missing from the Democrats. And they've really alienated her to the point where she's now saying she won't vote Democrat again. Now, I laugh because I'm like, if that happens, the sun won't set, because I can't imagine it happening, but that's what she is. That's where she is right now. So I guess my question would be in looking at what Trump's doing right now with the things that are popular, like immigration and other things, are Democrats going to stand in the way of that still? Like this Columbia brouhaha? I mean, I know AOC tweeted out something when it happened, but what Democrats going to stand up and say, we need to back Columbia over America? I don't,
Right.
So that's really the question, I guess, to Dan more so, is that if you're a Democrat, you are obviously strategist. How do you position yourself to get back to the common sense,
Yep.
middle road
Great.
voter?
Great question. Before
yeah.
Dan answers, David, does your mom like Josh Shapiro, her governor? Do you know?
Oh boy, that's a whole can of worms. So my mother, even though she's Catholic Irish, I'm on my mother's side. On my dad's side, it's Lebanese and Jewish. I have a lot of mix in me. But anyway, my mother does not like Shapiro because of his yeshiva policy. It's a very local thing where he backed government funding of yeshivas. And my dad's a former principal, so education is a big thing for them, public education. So the yeshiva thing has made her very anti-Shapiro. So she's sometimes a little over the place, but that's just a local thing. That
All right.
she voted for Fetterman.
Yeah.
And she voted against the Democrat. She voted for a Democrat who ran against McCormick. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Dan.
It's funny that you bring up AOC, because I was just looking. She sent an email out today that was like a 1-week summary of the Trump first week. And the first two things are about the J6 pardon and some of the stuff he did on energy. It's not about the DEI stuff, right? So she's not defending the DEI changes. She's not, she's talking about the Paris Climate Agreement and stuff. And that is consistent with what you see on TV, which is you don't see a lot of Democrats coming out to defend criminals, illegal immigrants who are criminals. In fact, the CHC, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, is split internally. How do they deal with immigration? One segment of their membership says, like Ruben Gallego and some others, we should support what the president is doing. To your point, it's common sense. There are other members of the CHC that say, wait a second, this is inhumane and we shouldn't be treating people like this. So Trump is flooding the zone. There's so much out there. I don't know if the party just thought he'd never actually do this, because they seem very flat-footed, even though he telegraphed we are going big and bold. I think the party does not know where to pick its fight and what it's for, because I think they all know in their core, we can't just be Trump derangement syndrome. It can't be an outrage about him. It has to be about people where we can try to own the issue and offer some sort of solution, not just an outrage. And even I get 100 emails a day from different members of Congress and everything similar to AOC's. They're all over the place. And so it's only been 1 week. Joe Biden was very popular the first few months, right? I'll just remind you, he was.
Yeah, I know, right. Yeah.
He was calm. He was not tweeting. He was not speaking to the press all the time. And those were attributes that gave him high approvals. So he has his honeymoon. I do think that Trump or world events will give Democrats opportunities. The question is, can we seize it? And do we have something to say? And we'll see.
Well, if I can just follow up just quick. So my mother got a call over the weekend from Ravison pollster. And they asked her, do you approve or disapprove of the president? Now, my mother, she is TDS 100%. Like, she can't stand Trump, hates the guy. January 6th, every day I hear about January 6th. So she loathes him, but she would give him a somewhat approval overall for what he's been doing. So that again just says, like, for me to hear that, it was like, wow, I never thought I hear the day that you would actually approve of Donald Trump.
I mean, you go to Steve Elmendorf's 3 A's, one of them was action. And he made the point, and I think he's right. Even people who don't like Trump or don't even like the action he's doing appreciate it's something. You are trying to solve problems like on the border and with this stuff. And it really goes to show Joe Biden did not do stuff. He didn't take bold action. The stories were always his team couldn't agree. The lawyer said you can't do this, or there's concerns about this. So it was like, how could he get to no? Whereas Trump is a bulldozer to yes, and to his benefit.
Alex, we talked about Trump's hold on the Republicans being greater than we can recall. I try not to be hyperbolic, but I can't recall a party being this discombobulated after an election. Maybe the Republicans after Romney lost, but what would you compare this to?
Oh, I don't know. It's the end of something. This is not about fixing the Democratic Party. This is about reinventing it. It's just run out of script. The old ideas of the Democratic Party belong to a different time. I've got my whole rap on, industrial age, mechanical type of thinking. But if Doug Sosnick were here, he'd say, look, this is a 10-year process, bad news.
Well,
But what I think will happen here, look, the best way to kill somebody, you're at war. Is it a frontal assault? Is it, okay, we're going to attack Donald Trump and therefore we're going to establish our own identity and succeed? Or is it an et tu brute strategy? Do you snuggle up to Trump and say, look, I agree with him when he's right on this, that, and the other, like Democratic candidates did often during the campaign. And then when you're close, that's when you stick the shiv in and say, but I disagree with him, of course, on this, that, and the other. You'll begin to see some of that. But we're talking about a party that has to have a new idea of governing and has to explain how, yeah, but what we didn't work, so we've got a better way to do it now. And
well,
that's
there was an article in the New York Times about hyperpolitics over the weekend. And the article's theory was we've had 12 years or 8 years of this hyper partisan, either you hate Trump or you love Trump. And that's all sort of gone away now. Like the resistance, you don't see people marching, there's no pussy hats or anything like that, right? So it's evaporating, kind of what you're saying, that the Democrats were held together by Trump, really, when you think about it. Everything was anti-Trump. And now that Trump is there, where do Democrats go from there? Like, what do they stand for besides against Trump? Because that seems to be the problem, almost, really, in a nutshell.
One other important thing about alliteration, David Dallas, is that often the way I was taught is that if the words begin with consonants, you can also call it consonants. So,
well, thank you. I don't want to take up any more time.
That's all right, David. Thank you. Great topic. Great question. Give your mom our best. Tell her to come on the show. We'd like to hear directly from her. Cut out the middleman. All right, Megan, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are what's on your mind, please.
Oh, hey, I'm Megan. I'm in Tucson, Arizona. This is Cozy, my really adorable little poodle. I promised to bring her on from last time. I just want to make a note here. I've been thinking a lot about the Democrat side, and in my lifetime, I'm an elder millennial. I've never seen the wind taken out of them like this, but I think it's the logical conclusion to all the moral relativism on that side. Like, I'm just living my truth politics. And I think that the Democrat Party became the party of don't believe your eyes and just take a leap of irrational faith. And so I think this is a faith crisis for the Democrats where their beliefs are being challenged. And that's tough. And that's going to take a long time. So that's just one comment. It's more a crisis of faith.
I think you're
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think you're right. That's well said.
Yeah. And there's so much to go on that, but I have a question for Alex. And the question is, I was talking to my diner, we'll say like my local network, and one of the big questions coming from them, they love the first week of Trump. They're all really happy to see everything in action. The lingering question is, what's going to happen to the economy? How long is it going to take to heal from what we understand is COVID brutality, plus, I think, a pretty incompetent government with AI? And average people get it. Like, crap, how do we recover when we have such a new frontier ahead of us? Do we have hope? How long? Because we're crippled, and myself included. Like, we're really hurting. And so I just wanted to get your perspective, Alex, on the government's role and reality in that right now.
Yeah. Some of it, I think that's a great question. And if I were smart enough to actually know, I'd probably be in Las Vegas. But I think, one is Trump has done it before. And what he did before will work again, which is a business-friendly, entrepreneurial-friendly economy. Two, if you want to put more money in America's pockets right now, cut energy prices. And he's
Okay.
going, and it's not bad now. In all fairness to Biden, we've kept producing a lot of energy. There'll be a lot more of that. And Trump, I think the Trump folks clearly understand that, and they see that as a big stimulus.
Yeah.
You look at Doge, less money in Washington's pockets means more money in your pocket. That's what they're going to try to do, as certainty, economic certainty, that we're not going to pick and choose any particular industry or business and punish them policy-wise because we disagree with what they're doing.
Right.
So I think things like that, then those other things I mentioned earlier, deglobalization.
Right.
What's the safest place to invest $1 in the world today? And what do you think it's going to be for the next 4 years? In a world that's becoming less certain because Trump is in retreat, right? We can no longer afford to be the world's policeman as we were post-war. So that, add AI into it, and AI, again, the businesses to invest in are not AI businesses. They're the business
Right.
who use AI to make everybody's life simpler and easier. So I think it'll actually be sooner than later, sooner than last time. And a lot of it is just confidence. A
Yeah.
leader that says, hey, lift your eyes over the horizon, we're going over here. It's going to be better there. That animates people. That encourages investment. That says, mom is going to leave the home and start a small business.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be pretty soon.
Okay.
Megan, thank you. Come
Yeah.
back always. All right, we're bringing two showmen right now. One, my friend Ray, who's a journalist from Ohio, and then Jonathan Showman, who's actually a showman by name. Gentlemen, welcome in. Ray, you first, because Ohio trumps pretty much everything. Jonathan, you're not in Ohio, are you?
No, I have family in Ohio. I was just visiting them.
All right, still doesn't count. Ray goes first, then Jonathan. Ray, well, Jonathan, where are you?
I'm in Oklahoma right now. Just moved here from Georgia.
Oklahoma. All right,
I'm
that's
sorry,
according
that's
to
my not that's the older cute one. She's
yeah.
having a bit of a meltdown right now.
Jonathan, you know the joke we make about your move from Georgia to Oklahoma.
What's that?
By moving from Georgia to Oklahoma, you raise the IQ in both states.
Thanks.
One of my favorite jokes. Ray, you first, my friend. What's on your mind?
So I have a theory, and I'm interested to any thoughts on this. And my theory is that the two eyes are quickly going to trip up Donald Trump. Right now, we are in this tsunami of Trumpism, where he does a great job of just making proclamations and throwing things against the wall so that nobody really knows how to react. But I think immigration and inflation are the two things that are eventually going to trip him up because one, Americans don't Americans want a secure border. They do not want people coming into the country illegally, especially criminals, but they also demand fairness and they demand people are treated fairly. And this first weekend, Holman has admitted that almost 50% of the people swept up in these ICE raids are not criminals. They're just people who happened to get caught up in what ICE was doing. Some of them were here illegally, but being here illegally is not a crime, not criminal. Most people don't realize that's a civil matter, not a criminal matter, unless Trump, of course, wants to try to make it a criminal matter. Number one, so I think that's going to trip them up. And number two, people don't really differentiate between the economy and inflation. The economy is fantastic. The economy has not been bad. Was not bad during the Biden administration. Inflation was always bad. And inflation is going to continue to be bad. And there is no way that a president of the United States can tame inflation, no matter what he or she says. So I was just in a grocery store today, and a guy with a Make America Great Again hat said, I thought Trump was supposed to take care of eggs being $5 a dozen. And I think those two things, eventually, not now, because everything's great, everything's rosy with this Trump tsunami. I think those two things, as time goes on, are going to be the two wishes of triple up.
I agree with your theory. Dan?
Yeah, I mean, sorry.
No, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, look,
Well,
I was going to say this to the last guest that, 48.5% of the population voted for Democrats. Two, Trump inherited a very different economy last time. There was not, the inflation wasn't, Alex, you surveyed, I don't think it was in the top 50 at the time in 2017. Now the problem is inflation is remaining sticky. It's not back to the Fed's desired 2% rate. By the way, it's not deflation. So prices are only rising less quickly than they were, but they're not going downwards. And he wants to stimulate the hell out of it, right? He wants interest rates slash spending to go through the roof, tax cuts to go through. In normal times, people would say that is incredibly inflationary, that confluence of events. And so I think for Alex, the reasons you said, he is deregulation, he is pro-business, there is optimism. There are reasons to think things will be fairly good. But you got to be sober. Like, he cannot prime the pump that much with inflation still hovering out there in today's environment.
Alex?
I think a lot of that is true, is a concern. I would offer maybe a little different point of view on some of those things. Look at Javier Milei in Argentina. Oh, a president can't possibly restore the value of their currency. A president can't possibly actually shrink government and make that big a difference. And so I think this is a big transformation, not a little one. If you're playing by the old rules, I think you're right. Trump is not doing that. This is a different level of ball game that you got here. And I think when people fear being raped while jogging, then I think people are willing to tolerate a little bit of okay, we've broken some eggs. There's some people we shouldn't have arrested, but we've got to do something big. And I think Trump is going to get a lot of slack for that kind of thing. Just making the effort. And on inflation, we've developed this theory that, well, presidents can cause inflation, Congress can cause inflation. Oh, but they can't reverse it. I would offer you the thought that we're in a huge deflationary period all around the world. We've poured enough money into economies, including ours, that inflation ought to be 5 million%. And it's not. Why is that? Well, Japan went through a long period where their economies were shrinking and deflating because failed to invest. They weren't reproducing. People forgot how to screw and have children and grow the economy. And the most valuable resource in the world is what? People. And we're in that too. So why is it that we have had this kind of deflationary impact underneath? So I don't think Trump is destined to fail on inflation at all. I think we may be sitting here in a few years thinking about it. Are we doing enough to grow the economy and stimulate the economy? And Trump, of course, is going to try to do that through the private sector, not through the public.
I was going to say, you sound like Joe Biden. We got to go big. We don't go too small like Obama.
Jonathan, what's on your mind, sir?
Good evening, everybody. I have a brief compliment for Dan, a question for Alex, and then something briefly to add to the discussion about what has Trump done for everyday people. Dan, first of all, I'm like an ultra mega guy, but you're like many people, you're like my favorite liberal. I think we could call you Dan the Steelman Turrentine, because when I hear your analysis, even though I might disagree with you, I know I'm not hearing propaganda. I'm hearing somebody who is a smart person who's really trying to think about why one should take a certain stance on an issue. So I really appreciate you. And Alex, I raised my hand because I saw you on tonight, and I love your perspective and input on political communication. And so my question for you is there any like classic book or classic resource that you say would really speak to the craft of political communication?
Yes. First thing I would read is The Three Uses of the Knife by David Mamet. It's a little book about storytelling and why we have our stories in 3 acts. And if you, first of all, read anything by David Mamet, because in my view, he's the best writer, American writer around. But if you read that, he has a line in there. What the political hack and the writer have in common is the ability to state the problem. As a political hack, I know that's true. That's how you tell stories. If you control if you want to, it's like telling a joke. It's the setup and the punchline, the problem and the solution. We don't do solution problem. That was one of Biden's issues, I think. Policy and then go out and why is it necessary? No, problem, solution, the 3 uses of the knife. That's about all you need to know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Jonathan, great question.
Yes.
About 100 pages.
Okay, I'll look that up and add it to the reading list. Briefly, my observation about what has Trump done for everyday people is from my personal life. I'm in the military, and I'm one of a few people remaining in the military that haven't had the COVID vaccine, and it's because I had a religious objection to it. And without giving the detailed story or analysis on why I think that that was a policy that ultimately hurt a lot of service members, and the Trump policy to restore people with pay and rank back into the military is the right thing, and it shouldn't be controversial to anyone that actually looks at the letter of the law. The issue became partisan, but it didn't need to be. But if you look at the letter of the law, so just briefly, I think that scheme was it was not legal in the first place and not executed legally. And so there's people that were kicked out. They had their constitutional and administrative due process rights abridged in one way or another, whether or not they had a religious objection to that. And in hindsight, and at the time, if you were an honest person looking at that issue, you see that there were legal and ethical issues in that. And what that goes to, so somebody is a service member, that goes to the principle of civilian control of the military and the legacy of what that meant. And now that we look back and what that did to the Department of Defense, is it undermined that. And it created an ethical situation for people on all sides of that. And so without going into the detailed chapter and verse of why I think that was illegal, I do. And people who thought that were prevailing in court, it's difficult to get standing. You can look into that if you'd like to, but
Jonathan,
the bottom line is that's the right thing to do for everyday people.
Thank you for all that. What do you think of our new Secretary of Defense?
I'm a huge fan of him, and I think that I'm a huge fan of him because he was controversial. This is the sort of, and I'm also a huge fan of was it Matthew Lawmeyer, the Space Force commander, is going to be given a position in the Department of the Air Force, and I believe it, Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Steller, the Marine Corps commander who was drummed out of the Marine Corps for, in my opinion, fulfilling his oath and upholding his command responsibility while in command in the Marine Corps. Those sorts of people are who needs to be empowered with authority in the Department of Defense. And I think Pete Hegseth is one of those people. Some of the controversial things I could go down, some of those things. I think even some of the controversial things were that he has said or positions that he has taken, although they weren't politically correct, they were reasonable positions to hold of somebody with his resume, and his lack of sort of senior leader or high level bureaucratic experience to me is a star in his resume, not a demerit. You need people who are not institutionalized in the deep bureaucracy of the DoD, who have a history and a track record of laying it on the line to uphold their oath and pay something and to actually lose something to lay their rank and their commission on the table for a decision, to be empowered with authority.
Jonathan, what branch are you in?
I'm in the Army.
All right. We're grateful to you for your service and for being here and speaking.
Just briefly, it goes without saying, everything I said, that's my opinion. I'm not speaking
Yes,
as a soldier. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Although if Secretary Hegseth sees it, you might get promoted, but
I'll take it.
that'll be instant. Now, grateful to you, as I said, for your service, for being part of two-way, and please come back regularly. Very grateful to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Alex, grateful to you. Dan, always grateful to you. And Ray, always much appreciate your participation. We'll be back 9 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow for the morning meeting. I'll be back tomorrow night at 6. We've got a special show later in the week that we'll probably tell you about tomorrow. So you can look forward to that. And with that, I say, arrivederci America. Good night.